Welcome to Jammin' with Jason Mefford, a show where we discuss topics relevant to chief audit executives and professionals in audit, risk, and compliance. We discuss the technical and soft skills needed to navigate the minefields of organizations. You hear best practices and practical advice for helping you advance your career, and we'll even talk about music, mindfulness, and psychology, because we can. So sit back and relax while you listen to the #1 podcast in the world for internal auditors, unscripted and unedited. Well, welcome everybody. I am excited. I've been talking with our guest today online for a little while, and really wanted to make sure and have him on and talk to him. I'm talking today with Emilio Rubio. And he's been a chief audit executive at several different companies, literally all over the world. Brazil, Spain, Luxembourg, Netherlands, currently I think in Switzerland, and has had over 15 years experience as a chief audit executive, but also has been in a line management role. And so there's some perspectives that I think we want to kind of bring up today to talk about. So Emilio, thanks for being on with me today.
Thank you, Jason.
It's nice to have you here. And so maybe just kind of give people a general basis kind of from your background, because like I said at the beginning, you've been a chief audit executive several different places, but you've also had some line management roles too, because I think this is going to be important to talk about, kind of how you've been successful as a chief audit executive. In fact, I mean, you've gotten promoted up, from that level into, an executive position where internal audit reports to you now. So maybe just kind of give the listeners a little background on kind of some of the types of roles that you've had as you've moved up in your career.
Well, I started as an external auditor in Spain. I'm originally Spanish. And after a couple of years, I moved into internal audit, which I thought it was much more interesting. Then in that American company, after a couple of years being in internal audit, I was pushed up due to the implementation of Sarbanes-Oxley as the head of internal control for one of the divisions. Then I was poached by a company in Switzerland and moved to Switzerland as chief audit executive when I was just below 30 years old. I did that position in parallel to supporting the M&A department because one of the things that I always wanted to bring to the table was value added. And at that time in 2005, I thought that the best way of ensuring that there was some value added visibly different from other things that they would have seen before was to audit the corporate development department, which was, it turned to be a success because I helped the executive vice president for corporate development resolve a number of issues. And through the creation of a special strategy committee, I had access to M&A from the due diligence perspective and also helping them with the analysis of targets. Within that company, I moved to Brazil in a business management position, where I stayed for almost a couple of years. Then I moved back to Europe as a chief audit executive, together with risk management, compliance, and governance in general. And then I moved to a GRC role for a large trading company. And currently I am in my company, as you said, in doing compliance, risk management, and supporting internal audit in whatever I can.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, and that's one of the reasons too why I wanted to talk with you, because we've had similar but different kind of career paths, right? Where you go, you're in audit, you're out of audit, you're back in audit, you're doing GRC, you're doing risk, you're doing compliance, right? And yet you still kind of keep coming back to some of this. And so one of the first questions is maybe, having stepped outside of audit and then kind of coming back in, what do you think are some of the big things that you learned that have helped you to become a better auditor?
Well, I think that first of all, in order to be a very good auditor, what you need to have is different perspectives. I think that in the profession, the people want to promote, they want to enter as junior auditors, then they want to go to senior auditors, then managers, directors, and at some point in time, they want to become the chief audit executive. I don't say that it is a bad role, but you are losing a lot of the world that is out there. Meanwhile, internal audit has their own jargon and their own backfalls, etc. If you have different experiences and both regionally or in terms of position, that helps you see the world with different eyes, and in turn, you actually understand some of the issues that you are repeating audit after audit after audit, that they really don't have that much value added, and things that you are not understanding before because you don't have that experience, then suddenly they appear to be important in the audit reports.
Yeah, because you're not. I love that term that you said, seeing the world with different eyes. Because in your career you were able to do that by having literally some of these other line management positions where you were now the person being audited, right? So you know
exactly
what it's like to be audited, where a lot of people, they move up in that internal audit role, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think in order to make them a great audit executive, you have to be able to have those different perspectives and see things in a different way, right?
Yes.
So even if you're, that's something that you might have to work on harder if you don't have those other examples. But I think it's great, if you've been audited and then you go back to auditing, because you can actually empathize with the people. Right?
Yes.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's a question of what is the value that you want to add. So when you are in a line management position and you are audited, you know where the issues are. So then you see what they are asking you, and you see how they may be targeting right, but failing the shot, or they may be targeting wrong, but then suddenly by a coincidence, they just get it right. So you see all these little tweaks because you have insider information. And actually, once that you come back into internal audit, you can use that part of that insider information, obviously adjusted to the actual occurrences, in order to understand better where do you actually have to target and what should be the expected result.
Yeah, because without, I mean, it does make you a better auditor to be able to have that different perspective, because again, I think, like you said, having that insider information and maybe almost kind of knowing, because sometimes as auditors we focus on things that don't really matter to the business. Okay, we think that they matter a lot to us. I don't know how many times I've heard somebody say, oh, I've got this big finding, and it's like, it's $50,000, and the manager's like, hey, I've got a $10 million revenue shortfall. That's what I'm concerned about. I don't care about $50,000. And so maybe speak to that a little bit, because having that different perspective, how has that helped you kind of decide which areas to go after, or kind of the different audits that you're going to do, so that you're not focusing on those minor things that maybe management doesn't actually care about?
I think that is basically understanding the root causes for the risk profile of the different companies or areas that you are actually auditing. Once that you have that more in-depth understanding, if you don't have that other set of eyes that is actually helping you discriminate in between what is important for the profession, or what do you think that is important for the profession, and what is important for the company, then is when you may actually miss a little bit the shot.
Yeah, because I think we were talking before we actually started recording, which I thought was interesting. Something that we need to pull in here is, and you kind of just touched on it, is I think sometimes as auditors we think that we're doing important work, but to the manager it doesn't seem like important work. And it's almost that mindset shift, because you hear a lot of people and they get frustrated and they say, doggone it, I'm the auditor. I should have access. You should listen to me because the IIA says I provide insight.
Yeah.
The managers
But
look at you
entitlement,
going,
entitlement is not actually something that you should have in your job description.
No, it's not. And it's like, again, it's if we think we're providing insight, that's great. But what really matters is, does the manager feel we're providing insight? And I think sometimes there's a disconnect, and we like to hear ourselves talk. And
yes.
and when we do that, because you've been on that other side from the manager side, when an auditor does that, what do you think about that auditor?
Well, you think that they are actually, well, you tend to empathize as well, because you realize that you were also in that position. So at least in my case, I have always tried to give a little bit more than if I would not have been that empathic, I would have. But again, just coming back to the point that we were making before, I think it's a question of whenever we think that we are giving some value, I don't think that management needs a lot of new ideas. I think that the people have become CEOs and CFOs of companies because they have a lot of experience, they have a lot of business acumen. So most of the times what they need is a push in the right direction in terms of they are blocked to take a decision, and with your work you can actually provide clarity, you can actually lift the cloud, lift the fog, and then help them take the right decision. That doesn't mean that you have to take the decision for them. That doesn't mean that you have to bring to the table a lot of new ideas. You just need to ensure that they have the right set of data in order to take the most appropriate decision for the company. And also one other thing that I have also been thinking is that whenever you don't have other experiences in terms of sales or sourcing or business management, etc., when you are talking to those line managers, especially when they are high up in the organizations, they are excellent marketing managers of themselves and their achievements. Meanwhile, internal audit, by definition, or by the definition of independence, that you cannot resolve the problems that you identify, etc., it is going to be very clear for everybody within the company that even though you identify the problem, you did not resolve it. So there is that disconnect in terms of value added. That where is the value added? In identify one thing that probably they already had identified and they didn't know how to resolve it, in give them the necessary tools that they need in order to resolve it, or to help them along the way for the resolution, being sure that the company understands that you have been part of the solution. I think that is the key differentiating factor. Whenever the company thinks that you are part of the solution, you will immediately start bringing value. If you are part of the problem, so we are very busy with everything that we are doing, and you are just coming here to put your finger in my eye, even if you are just doing your job, you have to do it sensibly enough so it does not hurt that much.
Yeah.
And within time, that is appreciated.
Well, and I think that's important, be a part of the solution, because I think sometimes, and maybe we can talk just a little bit about this, because I think auditors get worried about independence and objectivity, right? Because like you said, I can't consult on something that I identified, or I can't provide consulting or help fix the problem if I'm auditing that area, right? Because that removes my objectivity. But I like to say, instead of consulting, where I think it can be great, and I want to get your view on this, is instead of thinking about us, let's kind of give up a scenario, right? We come into a part of the business, we help lift some of the clouds or the fog, like you say, we identify something. And then, two things happen. We either tell them exactly how they have to do it, right? Because this is best practice. So you must do it this way. And we build it into our recommendations. That usually pisses off the manager. Okay. Really bad at that point. Typically. Okay. Or we say, well, it's your problem. You go fix it. And we'll come back and audit you later to make sure you did it right. And
which will also piss them.
Which will also piss them off, right? So I don't think either of those is very helpful. But I think where, sometimes we get so worried about the word consulting, I like the word coach better. Because I think it's no problem at that point to sit down with the manager and say, well, we've identified these things. How do you think would be the best way to fix it? What is challenging you about this? And actually have a conversation with them and help them provide that insight and help them make the decision so that they can move forward. Right. Because again, if we just kind of walk away, we're not really helping them. We can't do it for them necessarily, but we can actually coach or ask them questions and help them through the process, I think, without having a problem with our objectivity.
Well, that in order to respond to that long question, I think that you can actually help them as well. My understanding of objectivity, it is more related to professionalism. Rather than independence. At the end of the day, in my opinion, and I know that this is not exactly what the profession is striving towards, in my opinion, nobody in the company is independent. The CEO is not independent. The chairman of the board of directors is not independent. How are you going to be independent? And independent of what? What you can be is professional, understand what are the red lines, which obviously it is very clear that you have to be somehow independent, and you need to have some level of independence in order to make an objective work. But if you are professional, even not being 100% independent, when you are not 100% independent, then you will actually tell the Audit Risk and Compliance Committee, listen, I cannot participate in this audit because I actually helped resolve this problem. So for this one, my deputy is going to take charge. I'm not going to look at anything because we want to ensure that independence, but the fact that it is independent, that doesn't guarantee that it is going to be objective, because the objectivity of everybody is something that is completely exclusive. So, and personal to themselves. So for me, it's much more important that we agree with the audit committee, with the board of directors, and with the management, where are the red lines that cannot be crossed, and you engage with them in a way that it gives you certain freedom to operate also as an executive of the company, that it is in charge of internal audit or risk management or compliance. So that you can actually turn your department into somehow a more revenue center rather than just a cost center, which is something that most of the companies complain about. And that is why most companies now are trying to merge some of the functions, because they don't see the value of just having somebody independent that it is telling them things that they already know. And the more experience that you gather outside of internal audit, risk management, compliance, etc., the more different perspectives you can add into the table, and the more likelihood you have to identify or to help the people that you are auditing identify what is exactly the problem that you have and what is a way to resolve it. I'm not a friend of best practices either, because having been working in many different places, I know that best practices are, or in my opinion, they are very localized, and they have a huge component of culture, which obviously is very much affected by where you have actually resolved this. So one thing that is a brilliant idea in Argentina, in Egypt, it may be just something that there is no way how to handle that.
Yeah.
So I prefer more suggestions for the management to consider. So when they are facing a problem, if they go to these suggestions for improvement, they can actually take the one that they believe that is more appropriate and customize it, or as I call it since I was in Brazil, tropicalize it.
I like that term.
So it actually works in their place, which is exactly where it has to work.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important because, I've had these discussions with lots of chief audit executives over the years, and there's some that are so worried about not doing anything other than assurance work, and there's other people that, kind of like what sounds like what you and I are thinking is like, at the end of the day, just do what's right for the company. Okay. Yes, talk to your management, talk to your board, determine where the red lines are. I don't want you to cross this particular line. Okay, cool. We won't do that, but just worry more about doing the right thing for the company instead of, maybe the theoretically correct thing to do based on the standards. Because I think, when people are so idealistic about what they can or can't do based on a standard, it really does take away the value and the trust that others in the organization have for them. And
yes,
so,
because most of them, they are not internal auditors.
No,
so they don't even understand where those values are coming from.
Yeah. And they don't care. They have objectives that they're trying to meet. And so we just need to help them meet them. I mean, ultimately, risk-based audit, or the whole idea and thought behind that, is risks associated with management achieving their objectives. So those are the areas that we should be focusing on, is helping them actually achieve their objectives. And if they don't know how to do it and they want our help, then let's help them.
Yes.
We'll figure out, other ways. And this is kind of a good segue into another area, because you kind of mentioned already, it's like, look, if I help a part of the business, improve or change, and let's say later we have to go in and do assurance, well, then we'll have somebody else from my team actually do that. And I'll remove myself from the process, right? So that I'm not in it, and they can report directly to the board or whatever.
Or you can even hire an external consultant,
or hire somebody external to do it. That was
many options.
Yeah, that was the way it was for me when I got the chief risk officer title as well. That's what I just had the discussion with the board and said, look, I'm not going to audit risk management because I'm responsible for it. If you don't like what I'm doing, or you think we need to have it audited, we'll just bring somebody else in from the outside. And they said, no problem, Jason. We'd rather have you helping us manage it than to have you come in and audit and say, you guys need a risk management group every year. And it's like, we know you told us last year, idiot. Why don't you just help us? So, that was an area where we kind of, just excluded that from our audit plan, which was fine, ultimately. And sometimes you have to make those choices. But I think, just think about what's right for the organization. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because I know you've kind of gotten in that situation as well, where now you're responsible for multiple areas. I think risk, compliance, and audit, I think, all report up.
I have one head of audit that is reporting also to the audit committee in order to warranty that objectivity or independence.
Okay.
But yes, ultimately, yes.
Yeah. So I guess, how do you, since that person is, I guess, effectively administratively reporting to you, functionally to the audit committee, if we kind of use the standard terms, that auditors would use, I guess, what do you do to help try to make sure that person, really can audit objectively and is independent, enough in what they're kind of doing? And the reason that I ask this is because, I think sometimes chief audit executives get hung up on who they report to administratively and think that is really what defines their independence, where for me, I think it's more the people. So maybe kind of what are some ways that you do to help make sure that there is a high level of audit quality, in the way that you're actually managing that person who's reporting?
Well, I think that because this situation has been running for not a long time, I wanted to give this person as much independence as possible. So I have not been supervising the day-to-day on a constant basis. So he could actually set their own targets, because the strategy for the internal audit department we revamped last year. So he has been administering and actually executing perfectly, even in advance, all the audit plan that we had defined for this year together with the audit committee. I am there as a coach and a mentor, if I may. For anything that he needs, I involve myself in certain audits that I consider interesting, mm-hmm. also from the compliance or risk management perspective. And in turn, I also try to involve him in other areas, such as risk management or compliance, trying to get his opinion, because he's a person that has been in the company for much longer than I have. So his knowledge of the inners of the company is much higher than mine. So I think that in that sense we form a very good team, and it's just a question of not stepping too much into the day-to-day basis, but being there for anything that he or the team may need.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an important distinction, and that's the biggest thing, because I know, throughout my career, I reported to a controller, several CFOs, and a couple of CEOs. And I know sometimes we focus so much on the form instead of the substance, right? Like, I'm the head of audit, I should report to the CEO. Well, that ain't going to happen in most organizations, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, it's not so much the position as it is, like you said, having that teamwork with that other person. You realize and give. I mean, the best person that I ever worked for, it was a CFO. And so a lot of times, like when we would go and audit finance, you might kind of think, ooh, he's gonna tell us how we have to report, because he doesn't want, bad things coming out of finance. But he was totally the opposite. On those type of engagements, he would totally step back. There was no critiquing of the report, no trying to wordsmith, nothing. In those areas that I think that is important to be able to have in there, because you can coexist and add the value to the organization if you have a team type relationship. With them. One other thing that just to kind of probably wrap up here is something else that we talked about before, and I hear this a lot, and I loved your response. Is a lot of times heads of audit will get frustrated. And they'll say, I'm not being invited to the meetings. I'm not sitting at the table. You hear, I want a seat at the table a lot of times from people, okay? And you're laughing because, again, so when somebody says, I want a seat at the table, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that you have to earn it.
Yeah.
You have to do everything in your power in order to ensure that you get access. So if you want to be part of a club, you have some rules and regulations that you have to meet in order to have access to that club. So what you cannot say is it's because it's me, I am very good, and I'm very handsome, and very tall, or very whatever, then I need to have access to the table. I want to be invited to all the meetings, because that doesn't work like this. So you have to understand first, and that is the problem that we may have, is that meanwhile for a club, everything is written. So you can actually go to the information desk and ask exactly what you have to do in order to get access to the club. In this particular situation, you have to be much more resourceful, and you have to find out by yourself what is expected from you. So you have, on the one hand, you have your responsibilities of your position. On the other hand, you have a set of red lines that are clear, that have been set by the profession. On another hand, you have the application of those red lines in terms of what is the board of directors and the audit risk and compliance committee and the executive board, what are they expecting from you? And then from those things and the objectives and strategy of the company, which we haven't talked, but it is very important to really know by heart what are those objectives and that strategy of the company. Then you figure out where you can actually produce a better result for the company. Then if you actually are successful and you market it properly, so then all the good things that you have been doing are clearly assigned to you, and they are not assigned to somebody else that has participated in the process but didn't have really anything to do with it, within time, you will be earning the real trust, not the trust that people speak about, but the real trust. So whenever your management has a problem, they will come to you. Yeah. And whenever they come to you and you resolve the problem that they have, that creates a symbiotic relation. So they will come more. And at some point in time, they will say, I don't want to go to you. I prefer that you are here with me. Mm-hmm. And then you will be invited to the table. Yep. But it's not because you are entitled to, it's because you are delivering a service to them. And the service has to be in their terms, not in your terms. Yeah. Because your terms are not important anymore.
Well, and I think that is one of the biggest things, takeaways for people to remember is it's in their terms, not in our terms. Right. And so again, like you said, if somebody wants to get invited to the table, well, they have to provide that value to the group to effectively get invited to the table. And if you're not acting like you deserve to be at the table, you're not going to get invited. And you can jump up and down and pound your chest and say, but I'm the head of audit, I should be there. They're still not going to invite you.
But there are so many shoots in life.
Yeah. But, like you said, until you actually prove your trust to them, and I think that's a great way of looking at it is if your executives are coming to you and actually asking for your advice, that's the first step, right? If they're not asking you for your advice, you're not at trusted advisor level with them.
No, which is also fine because especially when you are new into a position,
yep,
they are not going to give you the keys to the kingdom. Mm-hmm. So you have to start finding out your way and slowly but surely start delivering on what you believe or what you have assessed that it is what has to be delivered, a part of your normal work, and prove to them that you are one of them. Yeah. With a different set of responsibilities. So your responsibilities are not to grow the revenue line, or your responsibilities are not to ensure that the internal control system it is applied properly in the sense of you are actually executing the controls because you are not in a line position. But you have to align what you are delivering to what they are expecting from you to deliver, and respecting everything else that we have said before in terms of the audit committee and the board of directors.
Yep. Yeah, well, I think that's great. Excuse me. Well, okay, we need to probably kind of wrap up here for this episode, but I wanted to just kind of go through and do like a little summary of a couple of things that we had talked about, so that at the end of this, people can, again, pull out your pen and paper, write down some things, and go back and start trying to do things different. But I know we talked about how important it is to actually help the executive solve problems. Bring a different perspective, have a different view the world in a different way to be able to help them add value. Get a deeper understanding of what actually is going on in the business, what those executives are dealing with. Think about the root causes of the risks. Have those discussions with them that help them kind of raise those clouds, get out of the fog, and help them, have the right information so they can make the best decision for the company. Because they're the ones that are ultimately making the decisions, right? Be a part of the solution, not the problem, right? So that we're actually there trying to help people as well. Know where those red lines are, what you can do, what you can't do, again, based on mean, to me, that's kind of like the whole purpose why you have a charter, is to get clear
Yes.
from the board and from executive what's in play, what's out of play, so that you know exactly where you are. And then, if you want to get a seat at the table, you really have to earn it. And you don't earn it because of your title. You don't earn it because of your degrees. You earn it by actually helping people and showing that they can trust you and that you really are adding value to them and helping the organization grow.
Yeah, and to the company, exactly.
Yeah. Does that sound kind of like what we talked about?
That is absolutely right.
Okay. Well, any I guess parting things that you'd like to make sure and send out there, because other internal auditors or chief audit executives that are listening to this, anything else that you think that they know as well?
More for people that want to enter into the profession and they are ambitious enough. What I would recommend is that they are not shy in terms of moving out of the profession and have the will to come back. So I know that it is not common, because people tend to think that this is kind of a internal audit. Once that you have been a long time, is like a prison. So whenever you get exposure to something else, then you better get it, because if you return, you will never be able to go back. But there are people that really want to make a career in internal audit, or at least when they are starting, that is what they think they want to do. I would actually recommend them to go, not to stay 10 years in internal audit, to go first to internal audit in order to understand what are the procedures, what is everything, and then go to a couple of other different positions in sales, in manufacturing, in finance, in whatever they want. And once that they have a little bit more, they see the world with different eyes, as we said before, then go back to the profession, go back to internal audit, or go back to compliance or risk or wherever they were, and they will see how much better they are.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because, like you said, that has served you well in your career, and it makes you a better, more well-rounded auditor. I think also, like we talked earlier about the empathy for others. When you've been on the other side of the desk, I think it makes you a better auditor to understand, how the people that are being audited actually feel too.
Yes.
So it is. So, well, Emilio, thank you so much for coming on today. You've got a whole bunch of wisdom that now people throughout the world will be able to learn from you as well. So I really appreciate you.
Thank you very much, Jason.
All right. And I'm sure that we'll probably have to have some future discussions as well. So
absolutely. Whenever you want.
All right. Hey, thanks, my friend, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much.
All
Take care. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you later on the next show. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy at ondemand.criskacademy.com. And that's C as in the letter C, riskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you also will have access to the video version of today's show. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.